Hello everyone and welcome back to the YouTube channel. So today we're going to talk about the very important video, and it is about why burnout is often caused by your private practice, your business design, and not by yourself. So before we start, I want to speak directly to the therapist or coach who feels exhausted but also confused about why. So you might still care deeply about your work, show up for your clients, and you might even still have great results, and yet something feels heavy. You feel emotionally full before the day even starts. So you feel behind even when you are working all the time. And you feel like you are carrying something you can't quite name. So if that's you, if you feel like that person, that I want to be very clear about something. This video is not about motivation or resilience, and it is not about pushing through, because burnout is not a personal flaw. Burnout isn't a signal that you are weak. It's not a signal that you chose the wrong profession, and it's not a sign that you can't handle responsibility, because in fact burnout tends to happen to the most conscientious and the most empathetic people, and also the most ethically committed professionals. So people who care, people who listen deeply, and people who take responsibility seriously. So if you are burnout or almost burning out, then the question is not what's wrong with me, but the better question is what I have been carrying without enough support. Because burnout is not a diagnosis at all, it's also a signal. And a signal that emotional load has grown faster than the structure designed to hold it. And once we understand that, then we can try to change everything. So let's look at who burnout tends to affect most and why it's not random and unpredictable at all. So let's cover an important question: why high empathy professionals burn out. Because burnout doesn't affect everyone equally. It doesn't show up randomly either. And it doesn't primarily target people who can't cope. Because in fact, it tends to concentrate in a very specific profile: high empathy professionals. Because because people whose work requires them to listen closely, track emotional nuance, hold space for uncertainty, and take responsibility for other people's inner worlds. So, therapists, coaches, and care oriented professionals in general. So, the issue is not that you feel too much, the issue is that empathy creates load, a lot of load. So, every session requires emotional attunement, presence without distraction, regulation of your own nervous system as well, while helping regulate someone else. So that is not neutral work at all. That is really energetically demanding work. And the more seriously you take the work, and the more invisible that load becomes. So you don't think, I am carrying a lot today, but you think this is just the job. I am here to help them. That's my priority. But you normalize the weight in the end. You adapt to it and you stretch. And because you are competent, you can stretch for a long time. You can endure for a long time. But until one day your system starts sending different signals. Fatigue that rest doesn't fix, irritability you don't recognize, a sense of emotional saturation, and the feeling that there is no space left. So not because you suddenly changed, but because the load crossed a threshold. Because burnout is rarely about a lack of care. It's almost always about excess care without enough containment. And this is where the real problem begins. Because most therapists were trained to work with emotions, but not to design structures that protect the person doing the emotional work at all. So to really understand burnout, we need to distinguish between two types of load that most professionals never separate: emotional load and structural load. And that difference changes a lot of things. So let's talk about the difference between emotional load and structural load. So to understand burnout properly, we need to separate those two things that are usually blended together: emotional load and structural load. So emotional load is the weight of the work itself. It's the listening, the attunement, the responsibility of being present with someone else's pain, confusion, or uncertainty. So that load, sorry, is inherent to the profession, and you can't remove it without changing the work, obviously. While structural load is different. Structural load is everything around the work. So how your days are organized, how sessions are spaced, how boundaries are held, how decisions are made, how availability is defined, and how predictable your weeks are. So here is the key insight about all those things. Emotional load will always fluctuate. Some days are lighter and some days are heavier. And I assure that you already felt those fluctuations. And structure is what absorbs that fluctuation. So when structure is strong, it acts like a container, and it holds the emotional weight so it doesn't all land on you. But because when the structure is weak, then the emotional load has nowhere to go. So it spills directly into your nervous system, your evenings, your weekends, your sense of capacity, and even in your private life. So that's when people say, I don't stop thinking about my clients. I feel emotionally full all the time, or I am never really off. That's not because you care too much. It's because emotional responsibility is being carried personally instead of systematically. So there are no boundaries between your professional life and your private life, and everything is chaotic, everything is mixed. There is no systems, no structure at all, and it's why you are feeling all this emotional load, but more particularly the structural load in the end. Because burnout happens when emotional load increases without a corresponding increase in structural support. And most private practices were never designed to carry that weight. And one of the biggest ways structural load quietly disappears is through something that feels generous but slowly drains your energy and is being available. And that's something that many therapists and coaches want to be. They want to be available, and that's really a great quality. But if you are being available too much, then it will break your boundaries between your professional life and your private life, and in the end it will have yeah, consequences on your work, on your mental health, on everything. So it's why it's really important to have system, to have structure in your work, and it's something that we were never taught for you in your during your during your schooling, sorry, and during my schooling as well. It's not something that we were taught, but in the end, it's something really important, because without boundaries, without structure, and without systems, everything is unpredictable, everything is chaotic, and there are no barriers that limit our professional life. And obviously it will have consequences on our private life, on our mental health, and in the end on our work as well. So let's talk about the always available trap. So one of the most common energy drains in private practice doesn't look like overwork. It looks like availability, being reachable, being flexible, being responsive, answering messages quickly, adjusting sessions when someone asks for it, thinking about a client between appointments. So none of this is wrong, but in fact, it often feels ethical, caring, and professional. But availability carries a hidden and really and a very heavy cost, because every time your boundaries are undefined, your nervous system stays slightly on. So you are not working, but you are not fully resting either. So you're in a state of low grade readiness, waiting, scanning, and holding space in the background. So over time, this creates a very specific kind of fatigue, not the tiredness that sleep fixes, but the exhaustion that comes from never being fully off duty. So obviously, the problem is not that you care, but the problem is that your practice doesn't clearly decide when care is held and when it's not. There are no boundaries. So your system carries that decision instead, and that's heavy. So because every open boundary becomes a micro decision. So should I reply now or later? Should I make an exception? Should I adjust again? Burnout is rarely caused by one big overload. It's caused by hundreds of small and little leaks that never get sealed in the end. So availability is really one of the biggest leaks in the end. So if burnout is not about caring less and it's not about working harder in the end, then the real question becomes what actually protects people who do emotional work like you. So the answer is not working more or more effort, but it's design, it's structure, it's systems. So let's talk about that design. So when people hear the word design, they often think of complexity, more systems, more rules, more rigidity, more things to manage. But design in this context means something really much simpler. Design is about deciding in advance what your nervous system no longer has to decide in the moment. So it's how you move responsibility out of your head and into structure, into systems. And a well designed practice doesn't reduce care, but it protects it. And it creates clear edges around emotionally demanding work. It answers questions like when am I available and when I am not available? What happens when someone needs more than expected? Where does responsibility end? And what stays inside the session and what doesn't stay inside the session? So when those answers are built into the practice, then you stop carrying them personally. You are no longer improvising care on top of emotional work. And that changes everything, obviously. Because burnout doesn't come from doing meaningful work. It comes from doing meaningful work without enough contentment, enough boundaries. So design is contentment. It's having a system is really having a container. So not rigidity, not coldness, but protection. Protection for your attention, for your energy, your longevity, and your mental health. And once the system is in place, then care becomes sustainable again in the long run. So if any part of this video feels familiar, then there's nothing wrong with you. You don't need more resilience and you don't need to work harder. You just need a different container, or you just need one because in many cases, people don't have a clear emotional container, a clear system, a clear structure about their boundaries in their work. And in the end, it's something that will prevent them from a lot of problems of mental fatigue. So if you recognize yourself in this video, then I want you to take one thing with you. Burnout, it's not a verdict. It's not the end, but it's really an important information, a significant signal. And it's really an important information about the fact that the way you work is designed, that the way your work, is designed no longer matches the weight it carries. And that means it's not something you have to solve today, right now. Awareness comes first, and then relief comes before change. So if you want a space with this where these ideas are explored slowly with other therapists and coaches as well, then I host a free community on the school platform that I call the Therapist Café. It's really a calm place for therapists and coaches who want to build sustainable practices without burning out and without betraying their values as well. So there's no obligation at all. But if you want to meet other therapists and coaches, if you want to learn about ethical strategies, ethical sales, ethical marketing, I am really focused on helping therapists and coaches building a thriving practice, but in an ethical way while staying loyal to your values as well. So the link is the YouTube description, and of course, if you liked this video, you can put a like and follow the YouTube channel, and let's see each other for the next video. Have a nice day.